Hello and welcome back, and here I am with the next part of the build. Right now I'm going to walk you through the base and the basement of the house. Alright, so you see here, I did the moldings for the walls I'm going to use for the basement. These are the stretcher bond full length of the walls. As I mentioned earlier, I'm using 5 across and 2 deep. So here we have the 5 walls and 2 deep. Right now this is just being held together by tape for positioning purposes, and I'll show you how I assemble this a little later. But for right now, what I have is assembled the outside of the wall. Put it here. This is that pink foam, that insulation foam that you find at your local hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, those kind of stores. This comes in a 2x4 section. I cut this in half, so this is 2 feet by 1 feet. Which is great because it's exactly the size as a standard shelf, which is what you have here underneath. This is just the basic 12-inch by 24-inch bookshelf that you can buy, again, at a Home Depot's, Lowe's, or any other type of home service center as such. So this will be the base giving support, and then this will be the groundwork. So eventually this will be all covered up and textured and grass and all that stuff. So for right now, after I did this, I put this here and center as best as I could, measure twice so I can make an outline of what I'm going to be cutting out. So what's going to happen is that I'm going to cut out the central portion here, which is for the basement here. This will be placed in, and it works out that the thickness of this is about half of this, half of the wall height. So you're going to have basement in the ground, half basement sticking out. And then I'll show you the next steps from there. Okay, so cutting out the basement here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut this out in one step. I'm going to be using a nice good metal ruler, nice good new sharp blade. This is one of those utility blades. And also, as I mentioned earlier, I measured this twice. As you can see, double line here because I mismeasured once. I measured again to make sure I had the right ones. So you see there's little X's here at the actual corners of where I'm cutting in. So now I'm going to go and cut this out, and I'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, and here I am. I cut out the hole in the pink foam here, and I temporarily placed the walls here. With dry fitting, make sure everything fits okay. It's a nice good tight fit. I can pick this up actually, and the walls will stay in place. So the next thing I'm going to do is take the foam and the shelving here. I'm going to scratch it up a little bit, and using some glue, I'm going to glue this down to this. So I'm going to spread the glue, put this down, put some weights on it, and let that glue overnight. While that's drying and setting overnight, I will work on adhering, gluing the walls, and I'll be back to show you how I glue the walls together. Okay, so here we're back. I disassembled the wall, and I got the 2-panel side wall here. So when gluing these together, one, you gotta make sure that the orientation of the 2 pieces you're matching up are correct. Now this is the back side, this is the front side, and by that I mean on these walls, the way that these are molded, you have the brick, and in between the brick you have the mortar, and on the top of each section you have a mortar joint. You can see there's a little lip here which is not present on the bottom. You take a look there. So you got to make sure that they're both pointing up and they're both matching. So here, when I'm gluing these, even though I'm gluing these back to back, I make sure that those mortar joints are on top. Let me just flip this over. Here you can see the mortar joint, it's there on top, and that's how you know you're gluing this correctly. If you try to put it the other way around, what you're going to have is 2 mortar joints on top of one another, and that's going to give you just that little 0.5 millimeter off, and you're going to have the wrong gapping in between. You're going to have double none, and so forth, as you see there. So always make sure it's glued the correct way around. Okay, so to glue these, what I use is just good old Elmer's white glue, and this is the multi-purpose glue. This is not the school glue. The school glue is water soluble. So if you get it wet afterwards, it might fall apart. So I just put some here in this little container. Just using a little brush, put some glue on, and then I'm just gonna brush on here on the edges. Oops, make sure I'm in the camera. And what I'm trying to do, apologies I'm not here on camera, is get it there in between the joints. Okay, and then I'll put both pieces together. Now the reason I'm doing this upside down, face down, is mainly because I want the walls to be as flat as possible. On the back side, there's ever so slightly differences between one to the other. It might only be a quarter of a millimeter or half a millimeter here and there, little dips and dabs. So it might be slightly uneven. So I find it best just to glue it this way. Make sure they're nice and tight. And run a little bit more glue in the joint. Fill up any little gaps. You see there. And then I'll set this aside. Oops. I'll set this aside. As you see, I have a plastic here on this table so that the glue doesn't glue onto the table and it's easier to remove. So we'll set that aside and do the other one. This is the other two section wall. Get them apart. Just be careful not to rip anything. Oops, still have a piece of tape there. And same thing. Take some glue, put them in the joints. Try to be as neat as possible. Here for the basement, for the cellar, I'm not terribly concerned because I'm going to be covering up the basement walls, and I'll show you that later on. So if there's a little glue mark here and there, it's not going to matter too much. And again, I'm just making sure that these are nice and even. Press together. Put a little bit more glue in there. And set these aside. And I'll do the same thing with the 5-panel wall section. Alright, and I'll be back. Hello and welcome back. Alright, after waiting a couple hours for this to fully dry and being able to handle it without worrying about it falling apart, I carefully assembled the basement walls and put them here in the cavity. A couple of things you'll see here in the cavity on the actual supporting board. I scratched a little hatch pattern here. This is just something to grab on for the glue, both for the foam and for the eventual floor I will put in. Here you'll see on this corner I start to glue in the corners, and basically what I am doing for here, and I'll demonstrate it here in this corner. Again, just taking some plain old Elmer's glue. In this case I'm just going to use it straight from the bottle so I can use the tip, and I'm going to slightly separate the wall out and just run a bead in here like that. I'm going to use my little spatula here, and I'm just going to squeeze this in here into the corner. I'm not too concerned about any overage here because eventually all this will be covered up. I haven't mentioned it yet, but for the actual cellar walls, interior and exterior, I'm going to use some stones, which is another mold from debris, and I'll show you that in the next video. So I'm using these Legos to have a perfect right angle, and I'm going to squeeze and clean up this a little bit more here. I mean, the Legos are plastic, so the almost glue is not really going to glue onto it that well, so I can separate it out pretty easily. So I'm putting one on the outside corner, and using the weights that I'm using to weigh this down, I'm going to press up against which is what I did on the other corner, so that we have a nice good tight seal. And I'm going to do the same thing on the interior, again using the opposite weight. I'm just going to put it in there, and again just so that it has pressure from both sides, and we'll let that dry, and then I'll do the same thing here for the two corners. So I'll be back after that is done. Hello and welcome back. Alright, so the corners have been glued and sufficiently dried. I removed the Lego blocks so that we're using to make sure I had a right corner. And now what I did, I went through it and just make sure using a right angle square, make sure everything is plumb on all the walls, as well as sure that I have indeed right corners in each corner. Also taking one of my other rulers here, making sure that the walls were flat as far as in this direction. Right? So also you might see, noticed here, that you see some dark marks here. These are indications from me where I'll be cutting open window placements. Two in the front here, two there, and one on each side. I've also marked off where I'm going to be cutting open the doorway to the basement. And over here in the kitchen area, I've also marked up more or less where I plan on putting the hearth, the fireplace for the kitchen. Now, for this basement, I'm not going to leave it the brickwork. What I'm going to do, I'm going to clad the inside and the outside in stone wall using another mold, specifically this mold, the stone wall blocks, from Diorama Degrees. So next up, I'll show you making this mold. Alright, stay tuned. Hello and welcome back. Alright, so the stone wall blocks. So much like in the previous video, I have my mold, which is here, and I washed it in rinse agent to help eliminate or minimize any chances of air bubbles in the mold. Once I got that nice and clean, shake off the excess water, I'll put it here on my plate. Now I already pre-measured the amount of casting powder and water that I need. Again, I am using Hydrostone plaster for this, and from previous testing, I need 14 grams of plaster for this. Okay, and as mentioned, oh, the other thing is, since for these stones, I do want them to have some color, so the color that I'm using for them is going to be this, some Vallejo pigments, specifically black. And I'll just add a little bit of this to the water. Like that. Now you can vary the amount of pigment, a little lighter, a little darker, a little different shades or different colors even, to get you some variations in the stones. Okay, so now that I got that there, I got my pigment, and I will again slowly add to the water, always adding the plaster to the water. Let the plaster absorb the water. Okay. Once I've gone about halfway, I'll give it a little tap and finish adding the rest. Just like that. Okay. Tap it a little bit. Let it sit there for a little bit. So you want it to absorb as much of the water as possible before you start mixing it. Okay, there we go. Alright, so now I'm just using my little spatula here. I'm just gonna stir it. And again, you want to stir it so everything's incorporated and the plaster has absorbed the water. You don't want to beat it. You don't want to beat air into this. Once I'm satisfied with the consistency, You're scraping all the water from the sides and the bottom. I will pour this into the mold so you can see a little better. Alright, and I'll start here with the deepest ones here in the middle. And once this is fully cast, I'll show you what these look like. Now this particular mold has got different size stones. Some are bigger, some are smaller, some are thinner. So this one particularly sets relatively quickly compared to some of the other molds. Okay. Now you might see at the moment it doesn't look like it's all filled. So what I do for this particular mold with the 14 grams of powder is that using this, I'll just trowel the excess into the empty ones and finish filling in the rest like that. So at the end the whole top is covered and all of the cavities should have plaster in it. And you can take your either spatula like this or a brush and just tap inside, make sure everything is completely filled. So you get no surprises later on with any air pockets or incomplete molds. I could have used a little bit more powder to ensure everything is full, but I found that doing it this way, it forces me to go through each cavity, make sure it's filled, and I don't have any problems later on. And also it minimizes any waste, because for this particular mold, we'll be using a lot of these stones, so I don't want to be wasting more powder than plaster than needed. All right, and just like the other one, we'll let this set for a little bit, and then we'll scrape off the top. Hello again. All right, so here we are back about 7-10 minutes later, and I'm just going to again take the scraper, start off in one corner, let the weight of the scraper just go across the mold, so hopefully it doesn't slide off. There we go. Wipe this off. Just do another light pass. Alright, and now we take this, clean it, and leave the mold alone to fully cure. Alright, I'll be back in a few minutes. Hello, welcome back. Alright, so it's been a while. Let this dry off. Now there's a little bit of a film on this, a little bit of a flash, so we call it by my mouth. So I'm just going to take this and scrape a little bit of it off before I demold the bricks. Don't have to do this all that accurately, just enough to get some of that flash off. And you just wipe that off. Alright, and just clean this off so we can show you what's in here. Alright, so for these are very easy to demold. You don't have to be too careful about them. The ones here in the middle, they got the larger blocks. Try to keep them here in order. Then that one's a half a block. Another half block here. I'm going to do this so that they are in the same order. Alright, I won't bore you taking all these off, so I'm just going to be back after I take them all out. Alright. Alright, so here we are. We took all the stone bricks out of the mold. So let me just bring this up maybe a little closer to the camera and angle it a little bit so you can see the different sizes that we have. So you have the full bricks, you have half brick, quarter brick, and then you have these little skinny ones. And you have the full length, half length. So you can use these and various different things, combinations to make a wall. And this is what I will be using to line the inside of the cellar as well as the outside walls. So I will be casting a whole lot of these, and I will be back at the next part of this build and show you the progress on that. Alright, thank you all for watching.